Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tom Munns. I'm the executive director for Idaho Ripple Effect, and I am joined by our friend Doug Traubel. Doug, good to see you today.
Hey, Tom, good to see you too.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah, well, good. I should do a little bit of an explanation for just so you know what you're walking into. Um, I decided that I was going to. I've always wanted to be able to do things a little differently. I've been involved in civic engagement for 20 years and stuff. And Uh, I actually left the John Birch Society as a coordinator for 11 years, only to find out that nobody would hire me after that. Imagine that. And but I still felt like I had gas in the tank, post stroke and meeting lots of people and all that. And but one of the things that really was really important to me was the value of relationships and the importance of people's sacrifice. And I think that you'll agree that there are people that have sacrificed their time and their money and effort that are not here anymore. Jack Stewart's one of them, and there's several others that are not around. And one of the tragedies that I found is I don't want I don't want one more person that has been involved in sacrificing himself for the sake of liberty in Idaho to not have the opportunity to be able to share a little bit about who they are so that the next generation of activists after we're gone will know exactly what we were doing and why we did it. The other important thing is the most important question that I get is, Tom, how did you get to where you are? How do you do what you do? And I had written a blog about that that'll be posted on the IdahoRippleEffect.com website. Um, but it's to be able to share my journey. And it isn't necessarily to elevate myself over other people, but what I believed it's going to do is set the stage to highlight the fact that we all began the same way. It might have been a different issue. We might have been personally affected. We might not have been personally affected. Um, but we all became engaged at some point. And so, what I wanted to do tonight, after that long intro, sorry, is to be able to learn a little bit about Doug. I mean, you've been around a while. Do people understand who you are and where you came from? And would you mind sharing that with us?
Sure,
Who
happy
was
to.
Doug when he was just a wee tot?
Well, I was born just outside of Philadelphia in they call them boroughs back there, a borough named Rockledge. And it was literally a one police officer town, like Mayberry, honestly. And Bob Snyder was the town police officer, full time, the only full time officer. And I was so impressed with him as a child because he'd walk me across the crosswalk to the elementary school, and he looked so sharp in his uniform. And as I got older, I watched the show Adam 12, and I had
I
this
remember.
a great show, great
Uh,
show. And I just a lot of respect for Bob Snyder, and watching the show Adam 12, I just thought, gosh, this looks like a really meaningful, purposeful, rewarding, challenging line of work, And so as a kid, playing cops and robbers, that sort of thing. And fast forward, my dad had the guts to move the family from Philadelphia to San Diego in 1978. And so that was what, seventh grade. And so I went to junior high, high school, and college in San Diego. And in that span of time, I was taking martial arts classes, and there was a sergeant for the Chula Vista Police Department in the class, of black belt. And he mentioned the reserve officer program for the Chula Vista Police Department. Well, I already had, sort of a admiration for the good guys as reflected in Adam 12 and Bob Snyder. And I thought, wow, I can be a part-time peace officer. And so I went to the Reserve Police Academy, and then I got my black belt. I was going to college. I minored in Spanish language, and I majored in political science with an emphasis on constitutional law. And so I became a reserve officer, and now I'm on the street working with full-time officers, and really amazed at what they are faced with every day. And I wanted to become full-time. So I applied for the San Diego Marshal's Department, which doesn't exist anymore. The sheriff's office absorbed it. But I went in to check on my status of my application. And I remember her name, Lieutenant Collier. She told me, "We are not hiring white males." And I'm thinking, so what?
Wait, what
I
year was this?
this was 1985,
Oh my gosh.
I think it was. Yeah, yeah. Because in '86, I did end up being hired full time by the Chula Vista Police Department, where I was volunteering as a reserve. But backing up to that interaction with her, I was stunned. But she was so blunt about it, and I I knew another white guy that applied for the LA Fire Department. He had an identical story, and so I started. I'm still finishing my college degree in this span of time, and I'm starting to ask, well, what what is it that would cause uh, a law enforcement employer to turn down a candidate that is
Highly
bilingual?
qualified.
Yeah, bilingual, a martial artist, very fit, pursuing his college degree, had been a reserve officer for almost 2 years by then, and I started to discover what Marxism was about, and how it amasses power through division and putting the majority culture on the defense. And so I just started looking into this, and in fact I did my senior thesis on affirmative action, and just started digging and collecting this information. Well, at the same time I'm learning about Marxism. As you know, I was born in Philadelphia, and I had a reverence for the founding fathers and their founding, because I touched the Liberty Bell before it was, surrounded by, structure. Yeah, I actually touched it when I was a kid. It was, you could touch it, and I walked through Independence Hall, and in fact, even in my room here where I'm sitting, I have a framed matted four founding fathers framed and matted from a field trip in elementary school. So, one half my brain has this love and awe of our history, American history, and the other part of my brain is examining what is undermining the thing that I love and stopping me from getting in a position to protect it and serve it. I mean, I just was. It's like this. Like I say, two sides of my brain are sort of wrestling in a way. I mean, or there's just like, why? Where's this? Where's this come from? So I started to do more and more writing and reading, and eventually, as you know, I ended up writing a book, which would be People's Exhibit A if the Biden administration ever arrested me.
Right. Nice.
But so anyway, so yeah, so basically born in Philadelphia up till the age 13, then San Diego, was with the Chula Vista Police Department, really from 84 to 94. Did a short stint with U.S. Customs because it was hard to finish my degree when I was a full-time officer, so I took a brief break to finish it, and they had this temporary job with Customs. U.S. Customs was like 784 hours, some odd number of hours, and then it expires. So I was an inspector at the San Ysidro border crossing, and then went back to Chula Vista full-time again, and then I was passed over for promotion by the president of the Latino Police Officers Association. and I'm like, what? And I look at his resume and my resume, everything he has, I have, and so much more. And
Mhm.
again, the question comes up to me, just as it did when I went to check on the status of my application with the Marshal's Department in San Diego. The question comes up, what is driving this? Why does merit not matter? And so I, continued writing articles and researching. I was in a shooting down there, and they tried to turn that into a racial thing. My fiance decided she did not want to be married to a police officer after the shooting, and so my buddy, who I went to the sheriff's academy with, he was coming to Boise for an interview with Fish and Game. He was a fish and game warden in California, and
Mhm.
as I said, we went to the sheriff's academy together. So I said, "Hey, Joe, can I come up with you? Three negative things happened. Fiance left me, the shooting, and getting passed over by a lesser, you know, deserved, candidate." I said, "Sure." So I come up here to Boise. My first visit was 1993. I'm driving around. There's no graffiti on the fences, and they don't screw your order up at the drive-thru because they speak English. And these little things speak to the quality of
Matter.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah, they speak to the quality of life. And um, so I thought, well, heck, I'm going to put an application in, and I'm going to apply not for the police department, but the sheriff's office. Now, why? Well, I got to go back again. When I went to the sheriff's, so I was hired by the city of Chula Vista, but I went to the San Diego County Sheriff's Academy.
Mhm.
See, and it was there and then that Sheriff John Duffy, the sheriff at the time, came in and talked to all the cadets. So it's all these sheriff deputy cadets, two Chula Vista cadets, two Fish and Game cadets. Everyone else is a deputy cadet, and he walks in, And he talks about the history of the office of sheriff, its ancient history, its unique authority, jurisdiction. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I finished the academy and I do my time with Chula. So when I come up here, it's an opportunity to hit the reset button because that speech he gave planted a seed, I guess, of sort of reverence for the office. I thought, that's an office that is authentic and it can do a lot of good. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to start a new career or start my career over, I don't want to be a police officer. I want to be a deputy sheriff. And even more than that, I want to be a peace officer. Because there's a difference between a police officer and a peace officer. We go down that trail if you want. But I was very happy to have been hired by the Ada County Sheriff's Office. And I started a family and became kind of hard to be the kind of dad I wanted to be with shift work and that sort of thing. So an opening came up at the Ada County Prosecutor's Office. And so I was able to use my investigative tools. I started the first gang unit for Ada County. I introduced the proposal and built the whole thing, and I was in a special unit in San Diego to do it. I had certain tools in the toolbox that were attracted to the prosecutor's office at the time, my investigative experience and my field experience. So they hired me, and that's where I finished out at. And of course, I ran for sheriff effectively 3 times now. And why? Because I love Idaho. I love Ada County. It's changing, and I want to defend it from becoming where I left. The Chula Vista and many cities and police agencies, local agencies throughout the country, have a lot of division in them. These different police associations are like the mafia. You have the Latino Police Officer Association I mentioned, the Black Police Officer Association, the LGBTQ, and and it just creates division. Instead of us all saying, "Look, we're blue," there's only 800,000 blue people in the country, roughly. Talking
Mhm.
about. I like to use the word peace officer, but there's the distinction. Let's use my language. Uh, there's 800,000 peace officers in the country. That's a true minority, right?
Mm.
So why are we dividing within our our respective agencies? Why are we creating this division inside? Well, it creates animosity sometimes. Like the guy that beat me out of the promotion, it'd be fine if he was deserved it. In fact, there's one really good cop I worked with. Mike Cuellar was his name. We were in a specialized unit called the Street Team, and we called him agents as a corporal, the 2 stripes. And that guy made most of the cases we had in there. He had a great investigative mind. If I were competing for promotion for the 2 stripes against him, he was already a corporal when we were in the unit together. I'm saying if I was in competition with him and he was chosen over me, I'd say good choice, chief. Because I believe in a meritocracy, right? But when you
Right.
have these racially exclusive, self-serving political units within an agency, it really creates a problem for the effectiveness of law enforcement. And so up here in Idaho, I started seeing some of the signs and symptoms of Marxism infecting law enforcement, and I think I want to get in front of this. I want to crush it. I want to respond to it, and because if I don't, we will become like a Portland or a Seattle. And so I wanted to offer effective, constitutional minded law enforcement, proactive, constitutional, peace officer, not police officer. So I had a whole philosophy that I could on a rabbit trail with you, but I was driven by wanting to protect my home, frankly, and not. Uh, hey, see, sheriffs are unique because the people are the boss; they elect them. I don't want to be a chief of police because the chief of police has to answer to the mayor, and if the mayor
Mm.
is politically correct and woke, then the chief has to keep the mayor happy. Well,
Yeah.
my boss as sheriff are the people, and so I like that relationship, and it gives some relative autonomy to even push back against a mayor who's advocating some Marxist ideology.
Mhm.
Where a sheriff's authority stops, his influence can continue. So he has a soapbox in the culture war, and so that was attracted to me too, to give police officers, or I like the term peace officers, in let's say Boise City, a voice because they can't really speak out, and the chief can't even really speak out. They may not always agree with you, but I think sometimes they would, like, oh gosh, somebody said it. Somebody said it. And I'm that guy. So because I wouldn't have cared about the next election. I want to do the right thing in this moment. So that's, I guess, a snapshot of my history and how I'm wired. I hate Marxism. I hate, you know, communism, any authoritative, any ism. I love liberty, and no, we're not a perfect, people or country, but in the span of history, I think this is the best that has ever been, and thank God Trump won. I don't think one man can turn this around by himself, but he's doing a heck of a job in 4 weeks.
So if you're going to make such a controversial statement, we would almost have to go into why, because I mean, there's so much, and I think you'll agree with me, there's so much animosity, on social media and even among our family. We all have friends that we didn't, or family that were secretly, well, not to me, but I mean, secretly to some people, Marxists. They're like, oh, I didn't know that you look like that, right? And so I think it's important that we that people start discussing anymore. If you say that you're going to like something, almost why you like it, you know? So people are, they don't like that we're revealing, all of the wasteful spending in the government. But like the leftists, if you will, are not saying a word about it. The only thing they can focus on, right, or what do they call it, deflecting or whatever, you know, their main focus is to try to annihilate a certain character that's in their path. In this case, it's Elon Musk. So it isn't really about what Trump is doing. We already hate him. We've already put him in the box. Now we're going to put Elon in the hate box, and then we're going to move on and hate somebody else and not even know why we're hating them, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yet, most of these people that are advocating for this, they don't know anything about limited government. They don't know the difference between a democracy and a republic, or or any variation thereof. And so it's important for us to be able to discuss some of those differences. In saying that, and saying that you were happy with Trump, if you had to say one or two things about what makes you so happy about that, what two things would that be?
I like that he shoots from the hip. I like that. He's. I mean, sometimes you can be right in your message and wrong in your delivery, and he's been that way too. But I just like
Yep.
the authenticity of it. Whereas you compare him to the empty suit Obama, who's a great teleprompter reader. And who was it? Was it Chris Matthews that talked about?
Matthews, his
Uh,
leg.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Unforgettable, unforgettable.
Unforgettable. So
Yeah.
I like that. I think he is genuine. I think he really does love the country. Yeah, he's going to make mistakes too. There's only one perfect person, that's Jesus, right? So so
Yeah.
so but we should pray for Trump, for his spiritual growth, by the way. But I think he's a different person now in this term than I think he's exhibiting more maturity. He's still pretty bold in what he says, and I like that. I like Teddy Roosevelt. I like bold leadership. I like people who aren't afraid to say something that starts.
Just grab something so random and say, we're going to change the Gulf of America or the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of Mexico. Somebody said a joke to me the other day. I usually screw up jokes. And of course this isn't happening, but it's a joke. He said, somebody said, well, Trump's going to change the name of the San Andreas Fault. Do you know what he's going to change it to? See, I screwed up the joke already.
That's more funny than the joke.
It's going to be Gavin Newsom's fault.
That's good, actually. That's good.
I thought I
That's
was going to really screw that one up. I'm really glad I didn't. Well,
that's
Doug,
good.
let me go back for a minute. So, to give a little bit of context why people do things. Like for me, I don't recall being personally affected by anything. I left Hawaii, and I guess maybe I was. I didn't really have any idea. I'd never read a book. I'd say I was a pretty ignorant fool. I was just body surfing and chasing girls and drinking beer and whatever. I just thought life was going to be that way. But I didn't really give any thought to personal involvement or politics or anything like that. But so when you talk about your background and your love for law enforcement at an early age, tell us about like what kind of are your mom and dad still living? You don't have to
No,
say, but they're not. They're
no.
gone. Okay, mine too. What when you had grown up with them, what were they? Did they have the same kind of political understanding that you had, or was there a pull away moment for you um, away from their worldview in the realization of your own?
No, I think we pretty much tracked. I mean, even later in life, it was my mom that got me turned on to listen to Rush Limbaugh regularly. And that was, and he was in the car with me on patrol oftentimes, you know. And so, even in the earlier years when I was in elementary and junior high before moving to San Diego, my parents were conservatives, and they loved Reagan, and my dad, had an entrepreneurial vein to him, and he owned several different businesses and always had the guts to try something different. And my mom was she worked occasionally, but mostly was a homemaker and a wonderful mother. And so yeah, there's no point where I like turned against them, so to speak. I think there was continuity, and that was part of my platform, I think, and they helped create my lens, I think, for love of country and certain ideals. So no, there was no moment where I ever, drifted away from their foundation. I just think I just grew on the foundation they gave me. And taking my mind back to Rockledge, that borough I was raised in. Um, my mom told me a story where Bob Snyder, that officer, came to the house. I was having a seizure. I was misdiagnosed as an epileptic, and he grabbed me in uniform, took me in the shower in uniform. He's in the shower because this isn't actually true. This actually can't happen, but there's a common term. He choked on his tongue. I don't think he can actually literally choke on your tongue, but that was how it was kind of described. And I don't think he really knew what was going on. I just saw this kid, sweaty and convulsing. He grabbed me and took me into the shower, his whole uniform wet. I mean, I don't remember that. It was described to me, and so that was just one of those things that you hold on to, that your parent shared with you, and then you build that on top of my own memory of him crossing me across the street. We had a bank robbery once where he actually shot at the bank robber. This is a town where it's like, maybe that doesn't happen, But I saw him
Right.
as brave, as selfless, as and he looked so big when I was little. After I became a cop in 1997, I go back to Philadelphia. I look him up. He's retired by now, and
Mm.
I go to the police station and I show my credentials so they know I'm not somebody arrested trying to find him, right? And
Mm.
they call him, and he remembered my family's name. He gave me permission to give them my address, give them permission to give me his address, and I knock on his door, and he opens it. He's got a little J-frame 38 in his waistband, and he looks so small. But when I was a kid, I looked up at him like literally across the crosswalk. I had the leather strap and exposed bullets and all that. But I wanted to tell him, and I was so happy that I could tell him because he was on his way out by then. And
Yeah.
that your professional demeanor and the way you cared for me and the community influenced me to become a peace officer. And so I don't know where I went with that. Answered your question.
No, it's
Ramble.
fine. So your turning point really was because part of these interviews and chatting with you is to hope that people watch them, the videos, the interviews, and become inspired by the different stories of people that have become engaged, to be able to learn about their background and where they came from, and what their turning point was, what got them active, and to learn about that process, what that looked like, and maybe learn a little bit about where they are now, to where they came from. Um, but it seems to me in talking to you that your turning point was really, you had a love to get into to law enforcement, and then you started basically seeing that some stuff just wasn't right, right? I mean, was that basically it?
Yeah, I think things weren't right in terms of the hiring, process, because they're not looking for the best and brightest anymore.
How appropriate that I mentioned that at the first part of the interview about JBS on my resume.
And so yeah, that certainly affected me. And then in addition to that, I touched on the division within agencies, and the public trust is essential and it's fragile, and so we should have the best and the brightest serving the community. And it doesn't matter, what you look like, as long as you meet the standards, and the standards should be high. The standards are being lowered now because who wants to work in this mess? When
Yes.
the officer on the street is more afraid of his administration than the criminal,
Yeah.
becomes less proactive. Now, I don't want a police state, but I want professional, proactive law enforcement. We're looking for not just a low hanging fruit make it look
Mhm.
like we're busy to make our sergeant happy, but we're looking for the child traffickers and the fentanyl dealers, and and even helping out with the the terrorists, or the illegal aliens, because now there's room for that with Trump on board to work with the federal government more closely with some of that stuff that's traditionally a federal function. But it's, any effective law enforcement has been negatively impacted by a philosophy such as implicit bias training that's taught at the sheriff's office. That was something that came up during my campaign, and that is a product of the CRT, critical race theory, which the premise of that is that race is the primary organizing factor of society. That's a
Mhm.
Marxist construct because the
Yes.
Marxists like to divide, right? So we need to push tradition back on its heels and the majority back on its heels, and make them the boogeyman. And so what is the impact of that when you're forced to learn this topic? Well, you're going to put the blinders on in certain instances because you're like, I might survive this interaction. I mean, there's a set of circumstances here that are suspicious that warrant a detention for an investigative detention. But because the person who's behaving in the suspicious manner, it doesn't look like me, a white guy, right? He's let's say he's black or Hispanic or whatever. I'm going to go around the block and I'll wait for
Yeah.
someone maybe to call it in. Now I'm being sent there, so my motives aren't going to be questioned as much as if I self-initiate, right? Or I'll come back and take the report on the crime I might have been able to stop, right? So you become more and more reactive. You become armed report takers. And so how does that defend a community if the proactive mindset of an officer becomes paralyzed through a fear of his administration? You know,
So
and
there's no longer any equal justice under the law. It all depends on, what their narrative is, right? If you have to protect black people or you have to protect Latinos, you've got to put everybody else on the back burner, right? Or you have to sacrifice them for promoting and protecting certain classes of people that the government has designed as a protective class, right?
well, sort of. I mean, certainly, and I've worked in some all Hispanic areas down by the Mexican border. Good traditional families of Mexican descent want law and order just as much as anybody else, right?
Yeah.
But if you're trying to be proactive in that area, where most of your stops are going to be Mexican gang members, right? And they're going to throw the race card up right away, and your
Yeah.
administration, who hires basically, CRT, implicit bias training instructors,
Mhm.
you're guilty to proven innocent. You get the
Yeah.
wind taken out of your sail pretty quickly as a proactive officer in these agencies where this stuff permeates the training. And so you can look the part, go through all the training, have the car and the gear and all that tax money invested in you to go out and find crime and suppress crime. But if you don't feel confident
Mhm.
that your administration is going to back you up, the other side of that coin is obviously someone needs to police the police. So if there is an officer out there being unprofessional, heavy-handed, I don't even like to use the term racist because even that word is a Marxist construct that didn't
For
exist
sure.
before the 1930s, but I have to use the enemy's language sometime. Um, but let's say that they are doing some, things that are immoral, then yeah, they need to be, you know, police. And that happens. I mean, we decertify officers who do, criminal things or immoral things, and they can't. But when we don't decertify an officer that should be decertified, it's like a game of whack-a-mole. He goes from a large agency and applies to a smaller agency, and they're so impressed that he worked with a large agency that they hire him, and he has the same bad behavior there. So,
Mhm.
and some people were, I think, a little confused about me because they see maybe a contradiction, but it's not. Because on one hand, I defend good, professional, proactive policing, even if the optics of an enforcement are bad, because bad optics doesn't necessarily mean bad police work or heavy-handed police work. And on the other side of the coin, I'm all about policing the police. Like, you violated, the Fourth Amendment, excessive force under the excessive force under the color of law. I mean, I
Mhm.
have no problem with policing the police. And that's why I had the background and maturity to look at these things one at a time, and not be influenced by a politically correct mayor or the media. It's like I'm going to
Mhm.
back my deputies as long as their actions are reasonable and necessary. And I've been there enough times to know. And then we have other. I used to be on a peer review board in San Diego. We would look at use of force complaints.
Mhm.
And one time I did recommend an officer be terminated because he shot at a moving vehicle. It had occupants in it, and it was really kind of a road rage thing between him and the other. He just lost his mind in that moment. And he was terminated. but I've vigorously defended officers who the optics to the untrained eye look bad. I'm like, hey, I've been there or in similar situations, and that was might look ugly, but it's a confrontational job to start with. So, you don't throw officers under the bus because of the public narrative. Let's say it's an enforcement by a couple of white male cops and a black suspect, and it turns physical. Okay, and the optics and the narrative is not in the officer's favor. Well, you don't cave and throw your deputies under the bus when you know they did the reasonable necessary thing. You
Yeah.
you 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 educate the public on that. Conversely, if it is wrong and it's investigated, then I would even go as far as to have a ceremony to melt a badge that was worn by an officer who broke the public trust or did something criminal. I had a case in San Diego where one officer used another officer's jacket. In other words, so the name on the jacket wasn't his, and he went back to a house of a domestic violence victim and made some inappropriate moves on that person. Right, that kind of stuff. That kind of
Mhm.
stuff. I mean, if it's criminal, they need to be prosecuted, and there needs to be some ceremony inside the agency to hit the reset button on what our oath means and what the public how valuable the public trust is. So melt
Yeah.
the badge, have a wall of shame and a wall of honor. You don't ever be on this wall because the public trust, like I said, it's fragile and precious and precious. So daily, a leader needs to um, back his deputies and hold them accountable and educate the public.
I think I was in, if I remember right, it was Rexburg or Bonneville County, and I saw Hall of Shame. I believe I saw
Oh,
Hall of Shame,
wow. Okay.
and I was really, really set back by that. And when you mention optics, I didn't really understand it. Because I think a lot of us, we had this built-in understanding of the media. I mean, who could not like Walter Cronkite? Aside from when he said that he's, has allegiance to the whatever New World Order or whatever. But they had a wall of shame. But and optics was really important. So as a coordinator with JBS and our Support Your Local Police campaign, I had learned a lot and how the media will actually take video, manipulate it to make the people uh, so it'll generate outrage. And of course, we've seen that with the Trayvon Martin case and all of these other things where they've really done a nasty thing to be able to put law enforcement in a bad light. And so, what that caused me to do is deal with some of the liberty people here in the state, that had this blanket idea that we hate cops and we hate this, and the only good cop's a dead cop, and all this weird stuff. And I thought, here's a guy, right? I've been visiting with law enforcement and all this kind of stuff around the state, and I've met some good people, man. I mean, you're a good guy, and I'm glad we're friends and stuff. But I've met some good people. I was in Burley one day, and they were training somewhere in some empty room, and I said, "Hey, how you guys doing?" They're like, "Great, Tom. How you do?" And I'm like, "What? Like, how do you even know my name?" They're
Yeah.
like, "We know who you are, Tom." And so the cool thing is that I guess I made a name for myself or whatever, and I put myself out there, and to the detriment, I guess, if you will, for some people saying, "Oh, now he's just gone to the dark side and all that." There's a whole different side when you focus on relationships. I guess the best way to say it is, and I've said this to many people in uniform, is many people like me there's a sort of a maturation process, if you will. And what I had to do is I had to separate myself from being confronted with the man in the uniform and a badge and look beyond that to the man and the woman, the husband, the father, the grandfather,
Need
you
more
know,
pronouns. Keep coming.
yeah, yeah, right. These people that once you pull away from the uniform, you see them as no different than us. And their mindset is different than they might be different than ours, obviously, according to the kind of information that they've been getting and what kind of narratives they're adhering to. But that, again, in my opinion, isn't necessarily the fault of the officer. It's the people. It's why we end up with crappy politicians, I believe, is because the citizens are just sitting back on their laurels and they don't believe that it's any part of their job to hold anybody to any sort of standard. Do you think that's true?
Um, I think the people do want accountability, certainly, if I'm following you. I mean, I think they do want that. They're frustrated that they don't always get it. And sometimes they do get it, but don't realize they got it because the leader of the agency doesn't come out and really educate them on the process, which is always slower than the media putting assumptions out and half the story out, right?
Yeah.
Because when there's an active investigation, it goes as it goes at the pace of the investigation. I mean, and so the public are hungry for all the facts, and it's a back page story by the time all the facts are there, and people and the court of public opinion, and they maybe believe that there was no accountability, when in reality, the officer was decertified, was fired. So public trust is fragile, and I think what you're, if I'm following you, I think what you're illuminating is a leadership vacuum or a lack of follow through
Mhm.
by an agency when there's something, when the optics are bad. And as I say, bad optics. I mean, you think about it. All the context on a daily basis in the United States, very few end up using any force at all, let alone deadly force or excessive
Yeah.
force. So there's a lot of self-control and restraint. The media decides which of these stories uh, to focus on, and the life of the story, because media is a business. It's also influenced by Marxists. The Marxists want a national police force. So you have to discredit the local agencies. That's why a lot of
For
agencies are
sure.
under consent decrees. The DOJ is actually running the agency behind the scene. And again, I have no problem with accountability, but I think it's best when the leader of an agency is elected. Now, in King County in Washington, the sheriff is no longer elected, appointed, appointed by the county commissioners. So that's a big problem. In fact, that person that happens to be a woman, she should no longer be called sheriff. She should be called the county police chief because she's appointed. And now she
Oh,
doesn't have the autonomy to go into Seattle, let's say, and keep your church open if COVID comes around, or protect your constitutional rights. The autonomy is lost because it's no
well,
longer elected.
it's no wonder that she must have been appointed because I can't remember the sheriff's name. He came and spoke to 500 Republicans here in Idaho Falls. Sheriff,
Richard Mack?
no, in Spoke. Oh, I was thinking
Oh,
of Spokane County. Horrible sheriff. I mean, this guy. Yeah, I couldn't even tell you the death stat. Anyway, as we move toward wrapping stuff up, so you ran for office. You said 3 times.
I did. I
Yeah,
did.
that's good. You did pretty good this last time. So
Yeah, the message got it. I mean, my hope is that, well, in the loss there's victory, and by that I mean our message definitely got all over the county. I think people's expectation of their sheriff is higher as a result of the message I got out. I think more people now understand the distinction
Mhm.
between a sheriff and a chief of police, between a sheriff and federal law enforcement,
Yeah.
the relative autonomy, the unique aspect of the sheriff being elected and answers to the people directly. So I think there's a lot of victory in that, and if the message outlives me, all the better. So yeah, I certainly didn't prevail in winning the election, but I feel it was a wonderful. I mean, I met so many great people. Wow,
We
that
got
was
to meet,
that.
and we got to meet you too, man, because you're such a personable, articulate, intelligent soul that
Oh,
you have a
thanks.
way to be able to slice and dice things in such a, I should say, compartmental way to make it easy to be able to understand some of the more complicated concepts. And so when I hear you speak, I'm like, and this was years ago, I'm like, how did that guy become so articulate? I'm like, I'm trying, bro. I'm trying, man. I'm saying whatever I can.
You do great, Tom. You do great. I respect your effort. I've known you a long time, and sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I'm not focused, so I don't always get it right. But
You do good.
my
You
my
do really
objective
well.
is, and your objective is similar. And we want to educate people to be more responsible citizens and hold our government accountable. I mean, we are a republic, as you said in the beginning of our conversation. It's frustrating to hear the news reporters and even people in office refer to us as a democracy. I mean, we are so off base on even understanding of what was given to us. And if you don't know what was given to us, you don't know what we're supposed to be protecting. You know what the lens we're supposed to look through is. And so these Marxists have done quite a job. Not educating our kids, but indoctrinating them. And I had this one former coworker of mine, Boise officer. His son was sitting across the table from him, now a teen, and these like Marxist things that he's learned at school. And my book became uh, a useful tool to this parent, this officer, to refute or the assertions that this teenage boy. It's like school has this child for more hours out of the week than I do. This father's observation is, which is true, and they've created Marxist basically. I mean, he's defending a Marxist paradigm, and so he used my book red badge as a way to fill in some of the lies and that the school has taught this kid. And so I was happy to I was sad to hear to see to understand the tension at the table, but I was glad that the book was a useful tool. I share that story just as an example of my concern that the Marxists for a long time now been gaining ground and capitalizing on our ignorance. And the ignorance is ignorance means lack of knowledge, right? So ignorance
Yep.
that's created through redacted history. And the left is very, very experienced at propaganda. I mean, the propaganda that our kids are washed in this country would be the envy of North Korea.
Yeah. Let me ask you something. I guess I could ask you this relating to the election and the overall pursuit that we both have in creating a more informed electorate. Um, what are some of the things that you feel like are successful that have been done? And what are some of the obstacles you feel like we need to identify and get out of the way in order to become more successful?
I mean, nationally,
Locally, nationally, whatever.
well,
It
I
might be a
don't
too
know.
loaded question, but
Yeah, it's kind of a hard one. I guess one of the things I do like, because I like competition. I like I like the charter schools, and I like the continued discussion about a voucher system. I think we need more more decentralization of education, more competition. I like that Trump right now is trying to get rid of the Department of Education.
yeah,
you know, I mean, the culture war finally and suddenly, because of Trump getting in and being so bold, courage is contagious, and I do expect to see more people now feeling safe, pushing back on the narrative and trying to reclaim some
I
ground.
see our governor doing that, by the way.
Well, well,
I said that, not you.
he's a political animal, you know. I mean,
Yeah,
and some people won't necessarily be sincere. They're
yeah,
just finger to the wind. Oh, that's the narrative I need to embrace,
yeah.
And whereas when you have a track record like you do, of sincerity and a long history of pursuing truth and educating on truth, we know who the true patriots are. We know who the charlatans are and the opportunists. But I do think with Trump in, we're going to see more changes at the local level too. I love this Doge. This has been amazing.
Yeah.
Oh wow, we need a Doge in Idaho.
It's like exposing what we already knew, right? I mean, we
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
know like the details, but we overall knew, man, there's
yeah.
just, you can't sweep that much garbage under the covers with realizing the fact that the covers are growing. It's kind
Yeah,
of
you're right.
insane, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged. But as I said earlier, one man can't fix all this. So we need to be we need to not just fall into the trap of, oh, Trump's in office, it's all gonna be straightened out. No, the local most government is local, and we need to stay very much involved in our school board, city councils, county commissioners, etc. And I hope that we don't fall into that trap of just, oh, good times roll is never going to. No, Rush Limbaugh used to say that the Democrats, the left, are more dangerous when they're out of power.
yes.
And so what do they have up their sleeve? What are they planning? I don't know. But I like watching the news every morning now. I see, at least in the culture war, truth gaining traction and bold opinions and actions. And so I'm encouraged.
I'm seeing more people glued to their cell phones now that weren't before. Like my wife, even she's checking. Oh my gosh, check this out! It's like, wait, I just got to get home and look at the news, right? And it's just all this stuff is happening, and I'm really floored. So, anyway, in conclusion, I had a couple of things. Before I ask you my final questions, you said you were bilingual?
Sí, no como si fuera mexicano, pero sí.
Oh my gosh, man, that is the muy bien, man. That's some good stuff. So you're like fluent in Spanish then.
Not anymore. I used to be. So I used to work for U.S. Customs. I mentioned that, and then Chula Vista, where I
Uh,
started my police career, is 7 miles from the Mexican border. So I thought to be a better servant, I should learn that language, and it helped me quite a bit in my early police career. But most of my time in Idaho, I didn't need it, demographics started to change. So I used to translate letters in the jail between the inmates or inmates and witnesses on the outside, and sometimes one inmate would give another inmate like a script, to read in trial. Well, I would search the cell, get that letter and translate it, for the benefit of the prosecution. So um, a lot of that was Spanglish. It's not like the Queen's Spanish, And one time I used to dream in Spanish, but I've forgotten so much. I can like, cobble things together, but sometimes I have to like use 10 words to describe the word I can't remember, and then you lose track of what you're saying, or
Right. I
use some irregular verbs and.
I always tell people I worked with some Spanish people once, and we were building galvanized fences and all that. I think what was the only thing that I knew? They always called me gringo and they made fun of me and stuff. It was those were the good old days. But what is it? Yo conozco solamente malas palabras.
I
It's
only
the
know
only
bad words.
that's me. I did it good, huh?
As you
So
did,
that
that's
yeah,
very
so that's about all I remember in it. I got an A in Spanish because my Spanish teacher was gorgeous. She was my art teacher too.
good.
Don't tell anybody, but yeah, it's amazing what happens when you're in the presence of something like that. But and I failed English. I just couldn't. Anyway, that's a different story. Anyway, so in finishing up, Doug, it's been a pleasure having you on. If people want to contact you, are you available for contact at all? Um,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, you can.
What would be the best way for people to find you?
Oh, probably just email me, which is BBE, the number four, B4 integrity at gmail.com. BE,
Cool.
the number four, integrity
Cool.
gmail.com.
Now, do you have a website or anything?
I do, but it's going away. It was dougforsheriff.com. That's still up. That won't be much longer. I see no reason to keep it going.
Okay.
But while it's up, there's a lot of good information on there. People can learn a lot about Office of Sheriff and a little bit about me and my platform.
Maybe there's a way that we should migrate that information and put it on my repository.
If you have a way of doing that, that'd be great.
Well, I'm in the middle of creating a repository, so and I have to say repository, not something else. Anyway, so also you have books that you've read that you've written. You have the Red Badge, right?
Right.
And where do we find that?
That's on Amazon.com. That if you just put in Red Badge, you're probably going to get the Red Badge of Courage, which is
Right.
about the Civil War. But my subtitle is long. But if you put in just the first few words of the subtitle, a veteran peace officer's commentary, Red Badge, a veteran peace officer, even just a veteran peace officer, it'll come up. But just so you know, the full title is Red Badge, a veteran peace officer's commentary on the Marxist subversion of American law enforcement and culture. It's a mouthful, but that's the book that the left just goes crazy about, and that Rob Beck got wrapped around the axle.
Well, I'll also have to remember to put that on our resource page for people. And maybe I can remember to put it in the comment section on this video. You also wrote another book, right?
Yeah, it says called "Can They Do That? How Police Get Around the Fourth Amendment," and that one I often give out for free. If someone emails me, I can send them a PDF because I want I don't want a police state. I think you know the police are the servants, right? And the people need to know the rules of engagement, so to speak, with respect to the Fourth Amendment. And case law, which is a misnomer because the courts can't make law, right? It's actually precedent, but the common phrase is case law. Case law runs the Fourth Amendment, and so the citizens need to know how police function if we're to avoid a police state. I mean, I just think an informed citizenry is so important. And so that book, can they do that? How police get around the Fourth Amendment? I'm happy to give that out or give you permission to share it in PDF form with anybody who asks. I don't want to make money on something that we should know and that the public schools intentionally leave out. I want to make citizens stronger by empowering them with knowledge. And I'm not encouraging them to hold court on the traffic stop, but know your rights and know when law enforcement's in or out of the guardrail, so you know whether you have something to complain about or something to talk to your attorney about. But it's important to have an informed citizenry.
Well, if we can post that as hopefully, I say if I remember, we will be posting your book, access to your book as a paid resource, and then maybe we can get a copy of that PDF. We can upload that resource once I get that repository page figured out, and people will have that resource available to them as well. So, Doug, My friend, thank you so much for all you've done. Thank you for your sacrifices and tireless efforts in the pursuit of liberty in Idaho. And thank you most of all for being a friend of mine. So
Right back
appreciate it.
at you, Tom.
All right, man. Well, maybe we get to talk again sometime soon.
Of course.
All right. Don't be a
Thanks.
stranger.
Okay, brother. Thank you.
All right. Talk to you later. Thanks.